Скажи, бабушка, привет. Ось тут ми зупинилися, значить нам потрібно йти довкола і в будь-яку сторону, тому що воно по колу. Це тут файно.
Сліди динозаврів. Да, оцей, дивись, який камінь. Oh man, Mano. Let's go to Mano. It's close. We are going to Mano. This is Mano. І що, і як тобі ці гори, ці щілини?
Your destination is on the right.
Динозавр трекс.
Сліди динозаврів, які йшли по дну озера і залишили сліди. Потім, видно, озеро висохло і сліди залишились.
Ось так. Ось так. От. Такі тут динозаври водились. Нога динозавра. Кактус. Света. She's coming with cheese. Дуже смачно. Воно з чесником. Це смачна штука дуже. Де ми є?
Я навіть не знаю, Настя.
Коротше, один із.
Це якась плаза.
Який ужас. Йдемо по ескалатору. В Вегасі не працює ескалатор. Який сором, точно, сором. А цей працює, все. Of the Gods. Цей долар принесе зараз нам 18 тисяч доларів.
Коротше, пройшлись ми по кругу, шукали вихід. Підійшли шукати на карті, де є вихід, підходить охоронець, каже, ви тут виходу не знайдете. Ідіть через казино.
Ідіть прямо.
І от ми йдемо знову через казино. Це, може це знак? Може це знак, що треба залити ще тих 4 бакси.
Вчора гуляли.
До ночі гуляли.
$4.
Так, у нас є чек.
Ми не все просрали.
Національний парк Гранд Каньйон. Всі в черзі стоять. А ми тут. Ми заїхали в парк за 5-7 хвилин. Нам страшенно повезло, адже тут черги можуть бути годину-дві. Але оскільки в моєї сестри є карта, вона собі купила карту у всі парки. Так що... Юху! Юху! Тут є скорпіони, змії, рінгтейл, щіп, дезерт щіп, білочки, чуквала. Будемо зараз шукати місце. Це візитор-центр. Зараз будемо дивитися, що тут де, купа машин. Ми хочемо їсти, бо ми їли ще в 6 ранку. О 6 ранку, тому йдемо.
Не їли?
Я з'їла булочку з Старбакса, а ти з'їла вафельку. Тут сестра трошки не може запаркуватися. Печенько, сир, яблуко і арахісова паста. І їдемо далі. Дивитися, що там.
Скорпіонів шукати.
Чекай, там написано було Шіп це хто? Вівця? Так. І їдемо дивитися на вівці. На вівців і їдемо дивитися на вівцю. З рогами.
На вівці.
На овець. На вівці.
All of its continents just where we would expect to find them. Except these land masses have not always been in the positions where they currently reside, or in the shapes we know today. Drifting and colliding, the continents have been in motion since they formed. Turning the clock back 250 million years, we see North America as part of the supercontinent Pangaea. 500 million years ago, North America was isolated, straddling the equator, and partially underwater. To see the conditions that created Grand Canyon's oldest rocks, we must travel back even further. 1.7 billion years ago, ancient North America collided with a chain of volcanic islands, which set in motion a dramatic series of events. The islands and seafloor were forcibly joined to the stable core of North America. Once attached to the continent, their rocks would endure, but they would be transformed in the process. As the collision pushed up mountains, it drove rocks and sediment more than 10 miles into the earth. Intense pressure and heat transformed this very material into the Vishnu basement rocks, the foundation of the Grand Canyon region. Even as the mountains formed, erosion tore at them. Eventually, the once deeply buried basement rock lay exposed on the surface. But it wouldn't remain on the surface for long. The stage was being set for the introduction of new sediment. By 1.2 billion years ago, continental growth had left the Grand Canyon region embedded in an ancient supercontinent at the edge of a narrow inland sea. Rivers rich with mud and sand flowed into this marine basin. Waves and tides sorted and distributed these sediments, and the sea added its own layers of limy mud. Look below the surface and see how each deposit became a distinct rock layer, cemented under pressure from the layers above. Interruptions in this accumulation left gaps in the rock record. Some interruptions were relatively brief, but others produced profound changes. Beginning 650 million years ago, the ancient supercontinent began to break up. As it did, the basin was stretched and uplifted, shattering the neatly stacked rock layers. Erosion took a heavy toll as well. The broken and scattered layers that remain are known as the Grand Canyon Supergroup. But there were many new layers to come. The land sank along the newly formed coast, and the processes of rock formation resumed. Often these layers capture the likenesses and remains of the creatures that lived here, from scary trilobites and slithering worms that scavenged the mud, to the sailback dimetrodon that roamed the shoreline. Layers continued to form until the rocks we see today were deeply buried. But how did these sheets of rock become Grand Canyon? What changes would the next act of our story bring to make this possible? One of the more striking things about these rocks is not how they formed, but where they rest today. The Kaibab limestone, the canyon's youngest rock layer, holds marine fossils, and yet the layer now sits as high as 9,000 feet above the sea where it formed. The forces that lifted rock layers to these heights were part of the same geologic event that built the Rocky Mountains 70 million years ago. In contrast to the jagged Rockies, uplift in this region was gentle, leaving relatively flat, unbroken layers. Unbroken, but not unchanged. Immediately, the youngest layers began to erode. Much of what had been laid down was scoured by wind and washed away by water. As the landscape evolved, new streams and rivers flowed across its surface, slowly shaping the land until the Colorado River's course was established 5 million years ago. During this time, signs of water's transforming powers were everywhere. Heavy spring runoff cut a path through soft mudstone at the surface and into harder layers of sandstone and limestone beneath. The next flood gouged a little deeper, setting the process and course of erosion in motion. Along the Colorado River, floods were impressive. Some carried 500,000 cubic feet of water every second, with tumbling boulders the size of trucks, together carving much more than water alone. The river swiftly cut through rocks that formed over hundreds of millions of years. Although the carving power of glaciers never touched Grand Canyon, climatic shifts swept the entire continent. During the most recent ice age, people arrived in North America, and they would leave their mark. We don't know exactly when people first saw Grand Canyon, but we know they saw an environment different than today's. Conditions were cooler and wetter, with more vegetation and huge mammals roaming the canyon country. The first bands of big game hunters found mammoths, mastodons, and giant ground sloths. But as the climate warmed and dried, the largest animals died out, and hunters began to seek smaller game. Their survival demanded an intimate knowledge of the canyon's native plants and animals. The tools they left give us a glimpse into their lives. 1,500 years ago, farming had spread across the Southwest. Water sources were carefully managed to grow crops of corn, beans, squash, and cotton. Any excess harvest was stored in protected granaries. Over thousands of years, native people forged strong ties with this rugged landscape. These ties remain strong today among many southwestern tribes. In 1540, native people guided the first Europeans to Grand Canyon. The Spanish conquistadors arrived, but the canyon provided neither the supplies they needed nor the riches they sought. Few other outsiders passed through until 1869, when John Wesley Powell led the first successful expedition through the canyon by boat. His dramatic accounts brought national attention to Grand Canyon, and tourists began to visit. By 1901, train service was established. The first automobile was driven to the canyon in 1902. By 1915, annual visitation reached 106,000. As the canyon's popularity increased, preservation efforts became more urgent. In 1919, the need to protect this unique place culminated in Grand Canyon becoming the nation's 15th national park. The national park idea continued to spread across the United States and around the world. But establishing these preserves is only the first step in a process that must be carried on for generations.
Один з найглибших каньйонів у світі. Він знаходиться тут. І ми знаходимося теж тут. От. Яка красота. Це просто вау. Слушай, давай на камінь туди виліземо і зробимо фоточку. А чо? Я полезу. Viewpoint. Це Колорадо Little Colorado River. І мух багато. Йоп твою, все, то не мухи, то якісь бджоли.
Це мурав'ї.
Ні, це бджоли, потім подивимось на відео. Я прям наступила туди. Воно виглядає як червь. Бачиш? Нарешті я побачила ящерку, яка втікла. І тут зараз вилізе скорпіон. Однісінькі, нікого
Ми
тут.
встали в 4:15.
Так, приїхали в 5:45, да, поки ми зібралися,
Довго
поставили
збиралися.
палатку. Да. Так,
Навіть не їли, нічого не пили.
зараз будемо снідати, пити каву. Зараз котра година? 9 вже.
8:30.
8:30. Вот. І що, йдемо ще на 3 арки. Коротше, облазив максимум. Вже 2,5 години так швидко прилетіли тут в парку.
Десь виїжджаємо.
Так, ну, я
А
думаю,
в горах у нас, напевно, буде сніг.
да. Я думаю, що ми все встигнемо. Все. Chipmunk? Дуже вчасно зрозуміли, що пішли не туди і десь непонятно куди. Так що там та попередня стежка, це невідомо, що це.
Нам би потрібно було гору перелазити, тут що справа.
Да.
Там вниз аж іде.
І ми могли б впасти. Да, спускаюся. Вон туди ми вела, блядь. Вон. Блядь, ладно, я просто. От туди ми вилазили. Так. 10К. Ага.
Ще 9-ї немає.
Да, ще чуть-чуть. Сан-Дюн. Що? Сан-Дюн. Арка.